Lindbergh kidnapping. What most likely happened? On the 3rd of April 1936, just before his execution in the electric chair at the New Jersey State Prison, a convicted kidnapper and child killer made his final statement. "You think when I die, it will be like a book I close. But the book, it will never close." These words seem almost prophetic, almost 90 years after what was dubbed as the crime of the century. The book on this case is still open, and we will give you a page-by-page rundown of the man convicted of murdering a defenseless toddler and the man many now think committed the crime. Stay tuned for some shocking revelations in the case that ranks right up there as one of the world's most famous true crime stories. The Lindbergh baby murder investigation is one of the most notorious in American history. On the evening of the 1st of March 1932, Charles Lindbergh's 20-month-old son was abducted from the family's New Jersey home. 2 months and a few miles away, despite a massive manhunt and a ransom payment, the child's remains were found. The investigation into the crime became a media phenomenon, and a suspect was apprehended and tried. The defendant was found guilty and sentenced to death. However, doubts have persisted over the years about whether he was genuinely accountable or a convenient scapegoat. Charles Lindbergh was an American aircraft, military commander, novelist, engineer, activist, and inventor. Lindbergh made the first non-stop flight from New York City to Paris in 33.5 hours on May 20th to 21st, 1927. It is considered one of the most significant voyages in history and ushered in a new era of intercontinental aviation travel. After his historic flight, Lindbergh received unparalleled acclaim. Biographer A. Scott Berg said people were behaving as though Lindbergh had walked on water, not flown over it, and with this achievement, he rose from virtual obscurity to instantaneous global fame, transitioning from an eccentric recluse into an adored public figure. Anne Morrow Lindbergh was the daughter of J.P. Morgan & Co. partner Dwight Morrow. Lindbergh met Anne in Mexico City in December 1927, after Morrow invited him on a goodwill tour to Mexico. The couple wed on the 27th of May 1929 at the Morrow estate in Englewood, New Jersey, where they resided for a time before relocating to their residence in the western part of the state. As an early example of paparazzi-style celebrity coverage, newspapers reported on Lindbergh's every move. Americans celebrated the birth of their son, Charles A. Lindbergh Jr., much as when a new royal is born today. The press could not stop publishing articles about Charles and Anne, and the public lapped up every piece of it. Charles Jr. was born in June 1930, a year after his parents' marriage. Baby Lindy, as he became known, was adored by the public, just like his illustrious parents. The Lindberghs were at their home in East Amwell, New Jersey on the 1st of March 1932 at around 10 p.m. when the baby's nurse asked Anne if she had her son with her. Anne was getting out of her bath and didn't have the baby. The nurse then informed Charles that she could not find the infant. They discovered he wasn't there when they searched the child's room. Charles found a small envelope near the window. It contained a ransom note. The Lindberghs immediately contacted law enforcement and their attorney. The investigators discovered the remnants of a handcrafted wooden ladder leading directly up to the child's second-floor window. By the time daylight rolled around, word of the boy's abduction had spread like wildfire. The New Jersey State Police assumed jurisdiction, and the police superintendent, Colonel Norman Schwarzkopf, the father of the famous military general during the Gulf War, allowed Charles to lead the investigation into the abduction of his own son. This was unusual even then, but Lindbergh's wealth and connections helped him persuade the authorities to let him participate in the investigation. The only tangible evidence the authorities had was the ransom note and the improvised ladder. The investigators presumed the ladder broke when the kidnapper attempted his descent down it. According to the FBI's archives, the ransom note featured atypical writing choices. For instance, The initial ransom amount of $50,000 included a $sign after the quantity, which is uncommon in English. Investigators concluded that the author was not a native English speaker. The phrase, "the child is in good care," was written on the note. This appeared to suggest that the author was possibly German, as gut is the German word for good. The perpetrator sent several more ransom notes containing similar typographical errors and anomalies, such as bode instead of boat. Most peculiar was the note's signature. It was not a typical signature, but an ominous symbol consisting of interlocking blue and red circles and 3 holes struck through the paper. The ransom note stated that this symbol would appear on future letters from the abductor, and indeed, perforations in the paper were present in subsequent correspondence. Al Capone, a notorious mobster, was among those who offered their assistance in the Lindbergh kidnapping. Dr. John Condon, a man in his 70s, was another of these individuals. He placed an advertisement in the newspaper offering $1,000 of his own money to the kidnapper in exchange for acting as a liaison between them and the Lindberghs. Amazingly, the kidnapper responded the next day by sending Condon a letter. The letter stated that the kidnapper would consent to use Condon as their liaison and requested that he contact Lindbergh about getting the ransom money. The letter contained the enigmatic symbol seen on the original ransom note, proving that it was sent by the kidnapper. Condon reached out to Lindbergh regarding this new letter, and Lindbergh not only accepted but also worked directly with Condon, showing him items belonging to his son so that Condon could identify him if necessary. The kidnapper and Condon began a complex string of back-and-forth communication using newspaper classified ads and paid minicab drivers. While the initial ransom was $50,000, the kidnapper later changed their mind and demanded an additional $20,000 in exchange for Charles Jr.'s safe return. In 2020 dollars, this ransom would exceed $1,200,000. On the 12th of March 1932, Dr. Condon's doorbell rang, and he received another note from a person hired by the kidnapper. It instructed him to visit a vacant local hot dog stand, where he would discover a second note under a rock. It instructed him to meet at the cemetery on the opposite side of the street. Condon sat and spoke with a man with a handkerchief over his face and a German accent in the graveyard. He called himself John, and the press later labeled him Cemetery John. Cemetery John asked Condon offhandedly, "What if the baby is dead? Would I burn if the baby is dead?" Condon was alarmed, but Cemetery John assured him that the infant was still alive, and that he would send the infant's pajamas as evidence. Cemetery John left, and the baby's sleepwear from the night of the abduction was sent to Condon and Lindbergh several days later. On the 30th of March 1932, Condon received another letter from the abductor. Impatient, they instructed Condon and the Lindberghs to have the money ready within 4 days. With the assistance of the Internal Revenue Service, they raised the initial ransom amount of $50,000. Despite being $20,000 short, they made plans to meet the kidnapper. On the 2nd of April 1932, Dr. Condon met with the man for the second time in a cemetery. Instead of returning the child after receiving the money, Cemetery John gave Condon yet another note. This one stated the infant was secure on the Nellie yacht off the Massachusetts coast. Lindbergh flew for hours over the specified area in search of the yacht, but found nothing. The kidnapper had lied. The Lindberghs and Dr. Condon never heard from the kidnapper again after this. 6 weeks later, on the 12th of May 1932, a truck driver named William Allen stopped along the roadside near some woods to relieve himself. When Allen saw a young body sticking out of the ground, he immediately called the authorities. They investigated and verified that the body was that of Charles Jr., buried less than a mile from the Lindbergh home in a shallow grave. He had been dead since the night of his abduction. Medical examiners determined that blunt force trauma to the skull caused the child's death. They surmised that he was dropped when the abductor departed the Lindbergh residence and the ladder broke. Shortly after that, Charles and Anne sold their home and moved away from the house that now held so many terrible memories. The media and the public reacted with astonishment and grief to the news. The police had no leads. The trail was lost after the discovery of baby Lindy's remains, and the kidnapper had vanished. However, the IRS had a plan. They had copied the serial numbers of the ransom money, which included gold certificates, which were rarer than regular currency due to their phasing out. Unfortunately, serial numbers could not be flagged back then. 2.5 years later, in the autumn of 1934, copying the serial numbers paid off. A teller at the Bronx Corn Exchange Bank discovered a gold bill with a license plate number inscribed in the margin. The teller contacted the police after suspecting this was suspicious. The receipt was traced back to a gas station. The proprietor noted the license plate of the man who gave him the note because he made a strange remark during the transaction. The man replied, "I only have about 100 left," in response to the proprietor's observation that fewer gold notes were in circulation. Using the license plate number, police apprehended Bruno Hauptmann, a German carpenter. They discovered $15,000 with serial numbers matching the ransom money. Dr. Condon's phone number inscribed on a wall, later proved to have been written by a journalist, and a missing board in the attic that matched the improvised ladder discovered outside the Lindbergh's home. The Hauptmann trial was a media spectacle unlike any other seen up until then. Newspapers labeled it the trial of the century. Hauptmann maintained his innocence throughout the investigation. His alibi for the most incriminating evidence, the ransom bills, was that a friend named Isidor Fisch left them at his house. Fisch, a fellow German, allegedly requested that Hauptmann safeguard his possessions while he visited Germany. Fisch died of tuberculosis shortly after arriving in Germany, and Hauptmann decided to examine the contents of the crates Fisch had left behind after learning of his death. He claimed to have discovered the ransom money in these crates. While this cast doubt on a critical element of the prosecution's case, they proceeded with dozens of witnesses, including Lindbergh and Dr. Condon, experts in handwriting analysis and timber identification. They also presented Hauptmann's journal, where the word boat was misspelled as bode, similar to the ransom notes. Hauptmann was found guilty and given the death penalty. He maintained his innocence despite offers to spare his life in exchange for a confession. Hauptmann was executed in the electric chair on the 3rd of April 1936, just 4 years after the passing of Charles Jr. Starting before Hauptmann's execution and continuing to the present day, persistent theories of his innocence persist. Until his apprehension 3 years after the crime, none of the investigators believed that one person could have committed this audacious crime alone. And despite Hauptmann's conviction, there was never any credible evidence linking him to the Lindbergh residence on the night the child was abducted. Who else could have committed this heinous crime? Until recently, no one ever seriously considered the principal suspects when a child has been murdered: the parents. Given Lindbergh's status as a global icon, investigators in 1932 never contemplated the unthinkable: that he was a suspect in his son's death. The circumstantial evidence against Lindbergh in his son's death is compelling, complex, exasperating, tenacious, and enigmatic. Lindbergh is portrayed as a god in every biography written on him and is still revered as a great American icon. Lindbergh was, in reality, a bigoted and misogynistic man. His well-known preoccupation with order, routine, and privacy would eventually overwhelm his daily existence and the investigation into his missing son. Lindbergh's actions and behavior on the night and during the investigation have come under intense scrutiny, as some things don't add up. Lindbergh stipulated that his son would be put to bed at 8 p.m. and that no one would disturb him or enter the nursery until 10 p.m. During this time, the kidnapping occurred. Lindbergh was expected to attend the NYU alum banquet but failed to appear. On the night his son was abducted, he reneged on an assurance despite his reputation for dependability. He told Anne that he heard wood breaking outside, but Anne, the 3 servants, and the ordinarily vigilant family watchdog Wagush heard nothing that night. At 10 p.m., when the child's nurse discovered the empty cot, she and Anne presumed Lindbergh had taken the child as a practical joke, as he had done several weeks earlier by hiding the child in a closet for hours. When Lindbergh saw the empty bassinet, he made an announcement. "Anne, they stole our baby." Lindbergh planted the seed that his son had been abducted before searching the residence for the child. Anne and the servants began to search the house in the nursery, but none of them discovered the ransom note on the window ledge. However, Lindbergh found it upon returning alone to the nursery. Handwriting experts agreed that this first note was distinct from the other 13 ransom notes, indicating that it was written under duress, and an attempt was made to conceal the handwriting. Lindbergh placed himself in charge of the investigation and demanded that the New Jersey State Police turn over all their evidence to him. At one point, he threatened to kill any law enforcement officer who disobeyed this order. When J. Edgar Hoover dispatched 2 FBI agents to assist with the investigation, Lindbergh refused the agency's assistance, whose experience and training gave them the best chance of recovering his son. Lindbergh ignored the FBI, but enlisted the aid of numerous quacks, tipsters, mediums, and gangsters, while obstructing every logical police procedure that could have yielded helpful information. Lindbergh substituted effective investigative techniques with his own, obscuring the trial, generating false leads away from his home, and implementing deceptive actions. Lindbergh denied a proposal by the New York Police Department to stake out the ransom delivery at the cemetery. Lindbergh justified his actions by claiming he did not want to risk his son's safe return. However, ransom notes never mentioned the child because the extortionists never possessed the infant. Was the Lindbergh infant's death an accident that his father would cover up during one of his hiding the baby pranks? Lindbergh said in the spirit of St. Louis trip, "The important thing is to start, to lay a plan and then follow it step by step, no matter how small or large each one by itself may seem." Charles Lindbergh had the temperament and intelligence to rapidly formulate and execute a cover-up if he unintentionally killed his son, even if it meant putting an innocent man to death by electrocution.